Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us and going a little bit deeper, learning more about our art and about Kwanjanim's passion and incredible depth of knowledge. And it's an opportunity for us to tap into that knowledge and learn so much more about the art. That so much more than punching, kicking, forms, breaking. It's understanding where this came from, how it works, why it works the way it does. So I would really like to welcome Grandmaster Douglas Cook.
Thank you, sir. Kamsahamnida. Good evening, everybody. When Master Adams was doing that introduction, he kept saying the depth of Kwanjanim's knowledge, and I was certain he was talking about Grandmaster John, you know. I mean, I know a few things, but thank you, Master.
You're very welcome, sir. Thank you. May I offer you some tea,
please,
sir?
yes. It's been a busy day.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. And let me do the same for you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Chupe.
Chupe, sir. Very good. So we had quite an interesting conversation last week. I think we really dug down to some very interesting topics. We have some interesting questions again, and I would like to ask everybody, please send in the questions that you'd really like to have answered, what you'd really like to understand. It can be about a specific technique. This evening, when Kwanjanim showed what that low block could also be, that's the depth of Taekwondo. That's understanding our art and how broad and robust it is. So I remember I discussed a week or two ago that when I had hurt my back, I studied Tai Chi Chuan to keep moving. And throughout the 3 years that I did that, I never once felt that if I ever had to, I would use anything I learned in Tai Chi Chuan, because Taekwondo is the real thing. It is action-based, it's scientific-based, and I think we are very fortunate to be able to study it and to study it with Kwanjanim. And it's a rare opportunity that you get to do that. Of all the schools in Orange County, Rockland County, Ulster County, how many Kwanjanims are there? There's not many.
Kwanjanim's not many, no. Although you got to be careful these days because, you know, with the internet, you can print out a certificate and you can order a 12-inch belt, you know, wide and have all sorts of decorations on it. Yeah. So, you know, the true count is very small, though. You know, a lot of first dans, half as many second dans, much less third dans.
First dans have ever been certified by the Kukiwan?
No. I don't, and I probably should, but the population of underneath the World Taekwondo organization is about 90 million, you know,
wow.
Which is a lot of people.
That's a lot of people.
So most of the time, and then that's probably a pretty good indicator because they don't really rank color belts. They do rank black belts. So to be counted in that 90 million number, I would say that's pretty darn close, you know, to the number of first dans.
Wow. We've discussed several times in several places about what they call black belt dropout. People who get their black belts,
right.
and you always say this is not a permit to quit. I forget the exact license. It's a license to learn, and that's so true. And I don't feel we've got that much in this school, but I see it in so many other places, and it's really a shame.
Indeed.
So, I mean, if you would allow me a very short story, I once heard a story about getting a black belt is like eating a watermelon. But it's eating the watermelon from the outside in. When you're a white belt and you're just trying to claw your way through that hard exterior, it's hard. It doesn't taste very good. And as you go up through the color belt ranks, you start getting into the white part of the rind, and that's not as hard and not as bitter as the green part. And it's not until you get your black belt that you finally reach that pink, delicious, sweet nectar of the watermelon. And for me, that was certainly true.
It's a great story. I've never heard that before.
Oh,
story. Yeah.
okay. So I think it's a very pertinent story.
Yeah. You see, what tends to happen a lot, at least in my observations, is that, and I'm told this by a lot of students, is that almost all schools have a color belt curriculum, right? And that's because people come to the school expecting to learn something, right? Now, if it's measurable goals, the only measurable goal might be the belt itself. And what I mean is they'll throw a lot of stuff at you no matter what level you are. And very much like we're doing right now in universal training, teach everybody everything and let them see what they could do, right?
Right.
And then they'll have a test, and there may be some kind of requirement to test. At Chosun, we have set curriculum, and it's all, as you know, printed out.
Yep.
And people know what's expected of them. We only feed students what we think they could digest at any one given time. And over time, it builds up, right? So our color belt curriculum is comprehensive to begin with. Maybe a little bit more orderly than most color belt curriculums in most schools. But what happens is at first dan, there is no curriculum, right? So the black belt hits the black belt, and then they start practicing the same things they studied at color belt, which you really, and honestly, there's nothing wrong with that because you are perfecting your skills. But in our school, we have things to learn because Taekwondo is so comprehensive, and there are, as you said, a very robust martial art. I like that term. And there's so much to learn, so much to use, that it will take a lifetime to learn it all, but it's got to be parceled out to where not only are you deserving of it as a loyal student, but that your capabilities are such that you can actually carry them forth. So that's the reason I, quite frankly, think that we retain so many black belts.
I think you're probably right. People enjoy learning and learning
Correct.
new things. And there's always, you once had a statement, there's no horizon.
Right, there is no horizon in Taekwondo. It's always constant working, always sailing forward,
Yeah.
It's the way it is.
It's really true.
To me, too. I mean, these classes, a lot of people have been writing in, thank you very much for doing that. I need your feedback. I need your connection. I need your words. They mean a lot to me. Saying how much these classes have meant to them, how it's pulled them out of the doldrums during the day and giving them some focus. Well, let me tell you, by teaching these classes, it's meant a lot to me, too. It's done an awful lot for me because I'm actually physically working out through the whole hour, teaching when I'm not jabbering away. And it's been very enlightening and very strengthening for me, too.
Great. This is quite a unique time in history.
Indeed. Yeah.
So we have some interesting questions today. Michelle, Instructor Radakovitz, I'd like to thank you so much for some of your in-depth questions that we've gone over the last couple of weeks, and I have a few more from her. So, sir, I'd like to begin with...
Bob, can I ask you just one question?
Yes, sir.
That microphone on that iPad is not that strong, so if you can speak up a little bit louder.
Yes, I will. Thank you.
Let us know if you can hear us, by the way, everybody.
Yep. And we appreciate any feedback of what we can do better. So thank you. Michelle's first question is really, again, going underneath. What is the most important or the hardest lesson you learned from Kwanjinim Chun?
That's a hard one. I guess you would probably expect me to say doing a good back stance or a good knife block or something like that, and the back stance would be a good answer. But it's not that. Two things actually come to my mind. One is don't be hasty, right? And this was sent to me via him after he passed away. And you say, how is that possible? Right? Well, my wife and I were out to a lunch with Mrs. Chun, and she said that her daughter, Kay, had a dream about Grandmaster Chun. And we were just building, our organization, the USTA, rebuilding it, rebranding it. And I had all these ideas and lots of things to do. And he also knew that we had just kind of moved into the school not long before, and that I was hustling and bustling around to decorate, And in the dream, he told Kay, his daughter, directed to me, not to be hasty.
Wow.
Don't be hasty. So Mrs. Chun actually said to me, she says, Grandmaster Chun told you not to be hasty. And I thought about that, and my wife to this day reminds me when I start going off on a rampage to do something, not to be hasty. And I'll tell you, I've used that wisdom several times to my advantage, I hope. The other thing that he said to me once, and some of these things are painful, by the way. People don't like criticism. People sometimes become offended if they're not open to it. But if you have an open mind, which is like a parachute, right? It only works when it's open. You can gain from it. And he once told me, think before you say something. Don't say something too quickly. Give it some thought. And that stemmed from a conversation he and I had where we actually came to verbal blows at one point. It was the only time it ever happened. We had a disagreement, and it had to do with the USTA and several things. But I said a couple of things, and we ended the conversation abruptly. It was the only time that ever happened. And subsequently, it was not brought up again until one day when I was driving with him in the car, and I thought to say, Kwanjanam, I really apologize for saying what I said that time, He says, oh, Doug, that's okay. He goes, just you need to think before you say something sometimes, because he knows I'm very hyperactive when it comes to that. And I hope I've listened to him, but, I always give a little thought before I say something. So to answer Michelle's question, Instructor Radakovitz's question, one would be not to be too hasty about things, which actually they dovetail with each other, right? And the other is to think before you speak sometimes. Those two things stick out in my mind.
Oh, that was really sage advice. Look before you leap, think before you speak.
Correct, right, well put.
Thank you. Another question is, aside from the books that you wrote and the books that Kwanjanam Chun wrote, is there one book that you would want all of our students to read?
I know we have a lot of Christians in the school, and they'd probably say the Bible. But as far as a martial arts book goes, I think that I would probably say, and you framed it very well, besides Grandmaster Chun's books, would be The Making of a Martial Artist by Grandmaster Sang-Kyu Shim.
Yes.
I can't tell you how many times I've recommended that book.
Yes.
Grandmaster Sang-Kyu Shim was in Detroit. That's where he was stationed. And he had, as you said earlier, some very sage advice. And he talks about the martial artist in very spiritual terms, not just in the physical, but certainly in the spiritual. And the inspiration I got from that book, I got it when I was a first dan. It was a gift when I was a first dan. And to this day, those thoughts carry with me. One of the things that he said that I've used a lot in class, and you've heard me say, is that he compares the martial artist more to a ballet dancer than a boxer. He says that the dancer is more akin to the martial artist than the pugilist is, And that's because of the grace involved and the amount of discipline and practice and the orthodoxy that goes into it. A boxer, while there are predetermined techniques like the jab and the cross and the uppercut and the hook punches and things like that, there's a lot of spontaneity involved in boxing, But when you talk about ballet, classical dance, there's a a lot of discipline and a lot of predetermined choreography that needs to be met perfectly. And that's very similar to Taekwondo. You know, our stepping basics, our forms are all choreography in a way, you know. And there is a preordained way to carry them forward. And so, yes, I agree with him 100% that, you know, we're more akin to dancers than we are boxers, you know. And then there's so many other concepts that he brings forward. So the book is difficult to find. It's called The Making of a Martial Artist. And again, it's written by Grandmaster Sang, S-A-N-G, K-Y-U, Shin, S-H-I-N. And if you would like to get it, good luck. Go online, see if you can find it. I've seen them anywhere from $5 to $500, you know, so.
It's funny you mention that because when I was a first Dan, I once got hurt and I was out for a couple months. And one of the students who I was training with had the book. And he said, here, read this book while you're out. And it was by far one of the best books I've ever read in the martial arts. And I believe this
Of course, mine are much better, though, right?
Well, yes, yours, it's different. It's very different. And if I recall, this is the book that said, when you strike a surface, a martial artist should be able to strike a 1-inch by 1-inch square. And I never forgot that. So that even when we're doing punching with the targets and kicking with the targets, I picture a 1-inch by 1-inch square, and that's what I aim for. I thought that...
You've used that in your methodology of teaching in the past. You've always said that.
Yes.
And I've used it. I've adopted it, too. You know, many of our instructors say things that I learned from them. I'm not the penultimate teacher in the world, that's for sure. And I know Master Crouch, you know, always used to say, make your own mistakes to the kids. You know, don't follow someone else in forms and make their errors. And I've used that saying time and time again because I think it, again, using that theme of sage advice, I believe that's what it is. Master Adams had always said, imagine that little square target, you know, and penetrate that target, and I've used that as well. So we're very lucky in Chosun to have so many illustrious teachers who are sincere to the heart of teaching and want to learn the intricacies of Taekwondo and then pass them on unhindered, without condition, you know. And again, one of the reasons why we have so many black belts, I think.
Yes. Would you like to comment, and you may not want to, but when we were in Korea, I think it was the first time together, I got a book, I believe it was called The Killing Art.
Right, sure, yeah.
Is that a book that you would recommend?
Wow, that's a really good question, Master Adams. And I'll tell you why. Master Adams is referring to a book called The Killing Art by Alex Gillis. And it is an amazing piece of research. He's a journalist, an investigative journalist, as well as a Taekwondoist, and he lives in Canada. And he and I have been in contact with each other, you know, over the years. That book became his anchor. It's a book that's been translated into several languages, and he's done revisions on it, but it always remains that book. And again, it's called The Killing Art. And Master Adams just asked if I would recommend it. And look, here's the answer to that. I don't know that I would recommend it to a beginner because it's a very cynical book, all right? It puts Taekwondo in a very negative light. Okay, that's good. You need to know the truth, right? But I also feel that just like the Taeguk, you know, the Omyang in the center of our patch, things have to be balanced out. And I think that you can read that book and you will be, it reads like a spy novel. It's a thriller. It's a really good book, extremely well researched. But when I finished reading it, I felt like I needed to take a shower because it was so negative against Taekwondo and its growth, you know. I was actually despondent for a while because of it. So I don't know that you should read it right now. You don't need any more despondency, right? But the point is, as a historical record, I think it's a good book to read. I think you should have a couple of other books on the side to go back to when you're ready, like Grandmaster Chun's autobiography that's being reviewed in Hunlin this coming month, you know. a good book, a good read when you're ready. But I don't think I would recommend it to the color belts. Not that I'm trying to censor anything. It's just that spiritually, I don't think it's a good. It would be like giving a child the Inquirer and saying, read about invaders from outer space who, whatever. I just don't think it's the right thing to read at the beginning.
Right, I would agree with that. I think you need to have a depth of understanding before you go in and understand the history.
Right.
I found it to be a very interesting historical perspective on the formation of Taekwondo, and that's what I really appreciated out of it.
It's also a little geared towards the ITF, the internet, because he's an ITF practitioner, the International Taekwondo Federation, which is neither, negative or positive, but he tends to focus on that a little bit more. I think that's enough to say about this book. If you want to read it, and you'll see what I mean.
Thank you. A little bit on a personal level, Michelle would like to know, what was your initial motivation to train in Taekwondo?
I remember driving down Grand Street, by St. Anthony's Hospital, and I was coming home from my executive job in New York City, wearing a suit and tie every day, And at that time, I was driving a Volvo, so I thought I was doing pretty good, young executive. And I'm driving home, and a thought entered my mind. I said, you know what? I have a new family. My daughters are only about 3 or 4 years old. Beautiful wife. What would happen if someone actually, came into contact with us and tried to hurt us, just because I was coming from the city. I worked in the city every day. And I said, I never was really good at fighting in school. I've gotten plenty of fights. In Brooklyn, you had to, Maybe it'd be nice to study a martial art. Of course, totally ignorant of anything about it. And that thought just went out the window. Then my martial arts career began with an ice storm, right? We had an ice storm one winter, and the down drains of my house were clogged. And I went to clear a down drain, and I stuck my hand into the ice and broke my middle finger. I went to the hospital, and they said, oh, by the way, do you know you have hypertension? You have high blood pressure, I said, well, I knew I had it, but I thought it went away, because I was taking medicine a long time ago. They said, no, it didn't go away, and you should start taking some medication. So suddenly, my health came into my mind. And my wife, Patty, was always telling me, Doug, you got to do something physical. You're just sitting behind that desk all day, So it turned out several of my friends were going to start studying martial arts, and they asked if I was interested to study. Again, totally ignorant to what I was getting myself into, and I said yes. And we began on Sunday mornings for about 2 hours. And I remember the first class I went to, we did stretching, and pretty much that's it, and we had discussion. And I went home, and I was aches and pains, but it was that good kind of ache. I was studying this Taekwondo thing, and of course that's what way I pronounced it, Taekwondo. And, it became a badge. I was so proud of it. Like, I'm studying this martial art. I'm going to become invincible, And then it started setting in what it was really about. And then as the months progressed, I was shown a copy of Grandmaster Chun's book, Advancing in Taekwondo. And I read about the philosophy of the forms. That was the end of it. Once I read about that, I realized there was a whole lot more under the hood than just the physical part of Taekwondo. And I am not an athlete by any stretch of the imagination. So for me, it was very difficult practicing, and it is still to this day. I'm just not athletic. And years later, I asked my teacher, ranked in the 4 or 5 men who were studying, where I stood if they thought that I would be continuing. And they said, you're the last one I thought would continue.
Wow. And
subsequently, all of them are gone. One of them, unfortunately, passed away. The others gave up long ago, and I'm the last man standing.
Last man standing. Great story. Let me just take you one step further on that story. You were an executive in Manhattan, I believe, was it?
Yes,
And in the music industry,
Right.
which was your love at the time.
still is.
And you made a decision to give that up for something that you didn't know you could perhaps pull off. And that's a hard thing for anybody to do. Could you talk a little bit about that?
I will, because it was painful and exhilarating at the same time. You know, anytime you step off a cliff, there's an element of excitement, but also an element of peril, you know. But you've heard me say this many times in class that I feel, and this is an Asian concept and a biblical concept, that everything happens in its appointed time. You know, there's
That's correct.
a universal order to things. It's the way, the Tao, you know. And if you fight against that flow, you're going to fail. It's going to be painful and you're going to fail. So somewhere along the line, you have to have the graceful acceptance of constant change. And even in the light of this crisis right now, you have to keep your head about you and say, what is happening? Where is this leading me? You know, it could be bad, it could be good. You don't know, but you have to be graceful about it, right? So at the time, I remember, and that's funny you should ask this question because I know that Master Adams doesn't tell me what these questions are, you know. But it's funny because I was just thinking about this the other day, is that when I was a red belt studying at Champion Taekwondo in Muncie, you know, with Grandmaster, with Master Lee, he wasn't a Grandmaster at the time.
Right.
One of his students came to him and he made this big announcement in class that this young man was going to start a Taekwondo school on his own. And I thought to myself, what, is he out of his mind? How can you ever provide for your family, let alone yourself, on the salary of a martial arts school? You know, and I just thought that was the most outlandish thing in the world. Well, obviously what happened was I was in the music profession and things changed radically. You know, technology did a headstand on everybody. You know, the big 2-inch tape that used to roll on the machines and the big recording consoles were decimated by digital. You know, everything became a hard drive rather than tape. Music retail, selling guitars, selling microphones and things like that, went into the web, online buying, you know, which of great deep discounts. So the writing was pretty much on the wall that this industry was going to be suffering and that it was basically a young man's profession, come to think of it, you know. So I started thinking more and more about the martial arts, and the martial arts was tugging at me, you know. It was saying, Master Lee came to me one day and he said, you know, you're going to be a great teacher someday. And I will never forget that either. And I said to myself, you know, this is something I want to do. This is something I think I would be good doing. So I started the concept, the mindset of actually teaching, you know. So here you had what we call a crossfade, you know, where the industry I was in for 20 plus years was tending to fade and change. And this other business, I'll call it a business, or this other discipline, was ramping up, you know. And I had the grace to think to myself, I have to keep my ears and eyes open. So as this other business was fading, and I was making decent money at it, this other was looming, you know, and I wasn't making any money at it, you know. So I had to make strategic plans on slowly letting this fade and slowly bringing this other up to where there was some kind of parity financially, you know. And it happened, you know, that's exactly what happened. And my daughters can tell you the discussion I had one night with my wife and daughters, and I said, I'm eventually going to make the determination to teach full time. Because we had the school for about 2 years, and I was still working in the city. But again, it was something that was lifeless, that was passionless at the time for me. It was something I just felt like I was fighting the tide, you know, and I knew it would have to come a time I'd have to make a decision. The time came, that crossfade met, and for years, the financial remuneration was minimal compared to what it was in the city, and never really met those proportions. But I found that I was able to survive and live on more or less. But guess what? The rewards and the happiness because you weren't going against the flow. You weren't going against the dough. And I'm not talking about this dough, I'm talking about the way, was indescribable. It made me a different person, And so I hope that that decision was good. I hope that I met my destiny and continue to do so by teaching with passion and by giving, when we ask our teachers why they wanted to teach, one of the most prevalent answers is they wanted to give back to Taekwondo for what they got, And of course that's very important, and I honor that. But it's more than just giving back. It's giving back with capability. It's giving back with skill. But you have to know how to do that. It's not just a passion, it's a skill. So I've studied deeply, both here and abroad, so that I can become a better teacher. So I hope that decision was good. And, to take it just one very small step further, right now, we don't know where we're going. And it's not a matter of our beautiful, enchanted community. It's not a matter of our state. And it's not a matter of our country. It's a matter of the world. We say Warwick strong, and that's a good thing to say. But really what it is world strong. As a world, we have to become stronger. And we have to navigate this really treacherous course that we're on right now. But if you are just inundated with fear, if you're just blinded by adversity, it's going to be really hard to steer a course. It'd be like driving with your eyes closed, through a forest of trees. So to me, as hard as it is, as difficult as it is, I'm trying to do this as gracefully as possible. Not just for my family, for myself, and for our students, but for the world,
Right.
Trying to plot a course where you're graceful about it and not blinded by fear. Everything in Taekwondo fits together. Nothing is isolated. So when we do this and try to approach, the graceful acceptance, change, is so important. All the tenets of Taekwondo are coming into play now. And this is where the martial artist really shines of the 21st century. Not how high you can kick, not how hard you can punch, but how steady your mind can be, not blinded by adversity.
That's a really good point, especially in today's environment. You're right about the flow and not fighting
Really?
the flow. And you brought up a great memory that came to me when you were talking, and I believe you were there when Grandmaster Lee, Master Lee at that time, did a seminar, a Hoshin Sul seminar. And I remember he came in, and it was effortless. Everything he did was effortless. And I remember watching that and saying, my God, the power of what he is doing without doing anything was just almost overwhelming. And I said, I'm going to try to do that when I grow up in the martial arts. And I remember, those of you who have been students of mine probably remember me saying this. When you do a Hoshin Sul and you have to muscle through it, you're doing the technique incorrectly.
Absolutely. That's something Master Mizrahi always brought up too. Absolutely. I mean, if you look at Hoshin Sul, it's heavily influenced from Hapkido.
Yes.
And you know that does anybody know what the definition of Hapkido is? Do you know? Our students? It means the way of harmonizing ki. The way of harmonizing ki. So you're accepting your attacker's negative ki, and here's the key, is harmonizing with it and turning it against them. So how are you going to do that if you're, like as Master Adam says, if you're muscling through it, right? You can't muscle through a Hoshin Sul.
Right.
You're absolutely right.
You need to take the time and learn how that technique
Correct.
works and why
Correct.
it works.
Right.
Yeah. I love our Hoshin Suls, and I've used them, so I know they work. With our students, you've traveled to Korea, Italy, France. Is there anyone else, and anywhere else, that you would like to travel to as a school, and why?
You know where I'd like to go is Okinawa. I'd like to go to Okinawa because, you know, I hope we get an opportunity to talk about this. I don't think we have enough time tonight, but maybe next discussion. The heavy influence that Okinawan karate or tote had on Taekwondo, you know. And if you look at the forms that Grandmaster Chun promoted, Shipsu, Jian, Yumbi, the Choki series forms, these are all forms that were rooted in China and Okinawa before they ever left and went to Japan, you know, and then subsequently Korea. A lot of the techniques that Grandmaster Chun taught, you can see the Okinawan influence. And that really set him apart from a lot of his peers, right? A lot of his peers, what they did is, I don't want to say they outwardly jettisoned a lot of the traditional techniques, but they abbreviated them in the favor of sport, you know, in order to score in the ring and things like this. Where Grandmaster Chun was steadfast in keeping a lot of the traditional techniques of the Kwans that when they originally started. There's a conversation that we can have for an hour on how we can demystify the concept of traditional Taekwondo. What the devil does that mean, you know, as opposed to sport Taekwondo? Because, you know, the word traditional is thrown around in all different venues, you know, not just martial arts, but in dance and all sorts of different places, you know, traditional this, traditional that, traditional cooking, you know. And you would have to, my short answer for that is, if you're going to define traditional Taekwondo, it would be defined as the type of Taekwondo that wasn't Taekwondo yet, right? But that was taught in the 40s, 50s, and early 60s, right? Then it became Taekwondo, you know. But clearly it was revolved around or spiraled around the concept of self-defense. And a very, very deep curriculum of blocks and strikes and kicks and things like this. But Okinawa was really kind of like the epicenter of that, you know. So I would very much be interested, if I was going to do that, to take the students to Okinawa. And it would be nice to visit Shuri Castle, which was one of the centers of Tote training, you know. But in the Second World War, it was decimated, and then it was rebuilt. And just recently, not too long ago, was burnt down again.
Yes, a couple months ago.
So I don't know. Yeah, I don't know where it stands now. I should look into that. But it would also be interesting to see where Otosu taught. You know, Anko Otosu, where Anko Azato taught, who were the teachers of Gichin Funakochi. You know, who taught the original masters of the Kwans, and they came back to Korea. But, you know, other than that, I mean, I really don't have, I mean, aside from just interest, I really don't have any desire to visit China, you know, to go to Shaolin Temple, or the Kodokan in Japan to visit the Center of Judo, or even the Shotokan in Japan, you know, or the KTA, the Japanese Karate Association, JKA. I guess I would be interested in that a little bit, but mainly I think Okinawa.
That's a very interesting perspective.
I mean, if it's going to be outside the country, I mean, there's other places in the United States I'd like to visit. We did a seminar in Chicago not long ago, which was very successful, you know. But I would like to visit some of the other USTA schools throughout the country as well.
So we only have a couple minutes left, and I was going to start some of the questions that deal with the USTA, as you mentioned, and you are the head of the USTA, and a lot of people don't quite understand what Grandmaster Chun's original goal was when he started the USTA. And I know that we're going to do something special next week, and maybe you should talk about what we're going to do next week in addition.
Right. Right. The USTA, the mission statement is to promote the ancient and evolving art of Taekwondo. That was his statement, right? The ancient and evolving art of Taekwondo. Now, we know by research that Taekwondo as an entity is not ancient, right? It was coined in 1955, so it's relatively new. So one of the things that we did, frankly, as officers of the USDA, is we altered that mission statement a little bit and said promoting the traditional and evolving art of Taekwondo, because it certainly is still evolving. And you know it firsthand, Chosun students, by the visit of Grandmaster Gyohan Lee. You know, that was, obviously he's creating new Pumse, right?
Right.
So it is still evolving, right? But basically, Grandmaster Chun's mission was to promote the traditional end of the art rather than the sport of the art, right? And to proliferate that concept. And he was, in the beginning, very, very successful with literally hundreds of schools. But as time went by, Grandmaster Chun grew older and his energy level dropped. And the USTA started fading a bit, right? And he so much so has said so to me at dinner one night. He said, you know, I did let it go. You're a businessman. This is why I want you to do it, even though I said I don't think I'm the right person. There's other people who are more senior than me. And he was adamant. He said, no, you're the business mind. You're going to do it, you know. So we've been, I don't want to call it a struggle, but we've been working hard to promote the Taekwondo nationally and internationally at this point. And we've had successes. One of them, of course, is the creation of Hunlian magazine. You know, any great organization should have a journal. We said that last week. And that was one of my goals to begin with, is to create this journal, which is called Hunlian. And that name was researched by Hal Pike, you know, our third Dan, one of our third Dans. And it means discipline or training and discipline, you know. And this is our fourth issue. And as I said earlier, it has a feature article and interview by Heald Cho, which is one of the most outstanding masters in Taekwondo alive today. And we've only been getting the best on this front cover. So the best have been drawn to us, and we've been drawn to them. So that was one of our goals, is to create something like that. The other was to do a world seminar, which we did last year, and that was extraordinarily successful, you know. So going forward, we want to make these discussions open to all people around the world. And the password that you have in your log-on information for our live streaming classes is only for our Chosun students. Those of you who see fit to pay your tuition, and in return, we give you things of value. You know, you're buying something in return. So we don't want to open this up to just anybody, but we feel that this particular program that Master Adams created is something that we would like to open up to the world in general. Our students in, our USTA students in Finland, and our friends in Korea and across the United States. But the login that you use for your classes now, your login on your live stream classes, will in future not get you into this. You'll have to put in a different login. Patty will send that out. Do you have it, Bob? Do you have that? Do you have the login, Patty? Oh, there it is right there. Okay. So you see that number. I can see it too. I believe it.
Oh, yeah.
This is like an eye test. 863-3505-6580. So you should copy that down, and next week when you log in, put that number in. So you're going to have a couple of logins. You have a login for your standard classes that'll be only exclusive to Chosun students, and then you'll have this login that you'll use to enter this program here, and know that you'll be in the company of people throughout the world. So that's another thing we're trying to do, is proliferate, reach out to more people.
That's really a good thing to do right now.
I think so too.
So we're going to remind everybody with that password.
Yes,
in an
Patty will
email.
send out.
Okay. And we can look forward to a lot of new people viewing
Correct.
this, and that's really a very big, important thing.
Yeah, and please, as Mr. Adams, prepares for this, he works hard on this. And I really think that was a great idea because we never really did this before, short of seminars and things like that. Help him, support him, send him some questions. I'm sure everybody has questions about their Taekwondo training. Instructor Radakovich sends in the bulk of them, I know, because Master Adams tells me. But all you need to do is drop an email to him. It's askgmcook@gmail.com. One word, askgmcook@gmail.com, and he'll present them.
So thank you for all the questions you've done. Thank you for being here tonight with us. And thank you, Kwanjanim, for this outstanding discussion that we seem to have every week.
It's very much enjoyable. I thank you for the questions. And Master Adams, again, thank you so much for being creative in this time of crisis.
Thank you, sir, very much.
Kamsahamnida.
Kamsahamnida.
Good night, everybody.